much to Mike for that introduction, and thank you very much to all of you for being here to listen to us. I understand that having groups of professors coming into this event is a little bit of a new thing, so hugely grateful to you all for showing up to hear us and to see what we've got to say. And I hope we can interest you. I hope we can give you some food for thought and send you away pondering the concept of attention in new ways. So just to say a little bit more about what attention studies is, Mike quite rightly said it is a coming together, a bringing together of many different disciplines, all of which study the concept of attention, but which do so in very different ways. From psychology and psychiatry, cultural studies and history, business studies, policy. There are many, many different areas in universities that look at the concept of attention, have a deep investment in the concept of attention. But those have never been brought together before. And we think that if we're going to understand what attention is, then we really need to bring these perspectives together. Crucially, this all comes out of a recognition that distraction is become almost a fundamental sort of underpinning crisis of the digital age. Barely a week can go by without reading in a newspaper something about the problems of distraction. Whether it's, our electronic gadgets are having too much of a pull on our time, whether it's children not having the attention span to read Pride and Prejudice anymore, whatever it might be, you're going to get a headline in the newspaper every other day. Something about, our attention spans are less than the attention span of a goldfish. You'll have seen that one probably more than once, actually. And we're going to talk about that as well, particularly. So that's what attention studies is, and that's why we think it's really essential, a really necessary thing to be doing at the moment. And the Centre for Attention Studies at King's is the hub that we've built to bring scholars together, to bring this discourse together, and to bring this debate together. And one of the key missions of the centre is to make sure that we're not just talking to each other, that we're talking to people like you as well. We really want to connect the academic study with people who care about these issues in all different professions and all different walks of life. So that's why it's such a great honour to be here and have this opportunity to speak with you today. And if I can just say a little bit about, I guess there are sort of two really distinctive features of the Centre for Attention Studies at King's. This is King's College London, the real King's, not King's College Cambridge, which is a pale imitator, of course, of us in London. So there are two things that are really distinctive about the approach we're taking to attention and distraction, and to the crisis of distraction that people keep telling us we are suffering from today. And the first of these is that we really want to get away from the yay or nay technology approach. What you'll also be seeing in your newspapers every other day is somebody, quite possibly an academic, coming and saying, oh, the world's gone to the dogs, everybody's distracted, this is a terrible state of affairs, democracy is being ruined. I mean, let's not talk anymore about democracy today, but you'll all have read those sorts of things. We very much want to get away from that idea that you either need to be hand-wringing about this attention crisis, or on the other hand, you need to be a kind of, firm go-getter technophile. We think there's a much more complicated debate to be had. So personally, in my research, I'm quite interested in the potential benefits of distraction. And I want to get away from this knee-jerk reaction that distraction is always a bad thing, while acknowledging, of course, that there are big problems with certain kinds of technologies and certain kinds of distractions. So we want to instigate a far more nuanced, interesting and complex debate about all of this that acknowledges both sides. The other really key distinctor, I would say, of the Centre for Attention Studies is we're taking a really historically informed approach. And we believe that you can't understand this current moment of crisis of attention without understanding the past and a long history of concerns about the relationship between attention and new technologies. So since at least the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, if not long before, there have been concerns about new technologies causing distraction. We can't really get our own moment into perspective unless we have a little bit of that longer reach, the longer view. Just to give you a very, very brief example before I introduce my colleagues, my own work has often been looking at a lot of manuscripts in archives. what's really noticeable in the late 19th century is looking through a box of letters, and then you suddenly realize that everything in that box of letters has the same date. And then what you understand is actually in late 19th century London, there were 12 postal deliveries a day. 12. This was not the postman knocking once, this was the postman knocking 12 times on your door in a day. And I was reading correspondence that in the first postal delivery in the morning, people were saying to each other, why don't we meet for dinner? Over the course of the letters during the day, they've had a big argument, they've fallen out, they've made up, they're still going to meet for dinner that evening, and they do eventually make it for dinner at the end of that day. So my point here is that we tend to think about a world, the past, as being a world without digital technology. And we tend to think about that world as being the same as the world now, but minus email, or minus the web, or minus whatever. And my point is it really wasn't. That these letters that I'm looking at in archives are basically like emails, right? They're being exchanged with the frequency of emails. So we need to complicate this idea that the world has suddenly got a lot more complicated, that there's suddenly a lot more demands on our time. That may be true in some ways, but I can give you plenty of examples that show you how the past is not just the present minus the digital. There were many draws on people's attention, there were many interruptions, there are many distractions that we don't have today because those things have been taken over by the digital world. But it's a very complicated picture, and that's something that we want to acknowledge in the research that we're doing. And I'd say get a more interesting, nuanced and complex debate around this rather than a simplistic binary that pitches people against one another. So, with that, I am going to introduce some really fabulous colleagues, 4 of whom are here in person, and 1 of whom is going to appear for you virtually, on the screen I hope, from America. So we're going to hear the 4 speakers in this order, I think. First of all, we're going to hear from Professor Shanuga Bark, who is my co-director for the Center for Attention Studies at King's, and who is one of the world-leading experts in ADHD. Professor of psychology and psychiatry. Really phenomenal to have Edmund talking with us today. And ADHD has become one of those things that's got bound up with the whole discourse on attention distraction in the digital age. Then we're going to hear from my colleague Kate Devlin, Dr. Kate Devlin, who is a really world-leading expert on AI and society and that relationship between those sorts of new technological advancements and society and culture. And who has, I don't know if she's going to talk about it today, written some extremely interesting and popular work on sex robots. Then we're going to turn to Julia Bell, we're super happy to have Julia with us today. Julia is not from King's College London, Julia is from Birkbeck College, also in London. We're very honoured to have her as an affiliated associated member of the Centre for Attention Studies at King's. And then we're going to go to Bobby Duffy, Professor of Public Policy, who is much engaged at the moment with the current political shenanigans, but who has, I'm really delighted to say, been able to spare the time to be with us today to talk about some really interesting work that he and the unit have done on public opinion around attention distraction. So this is super interesting as well. Then our virtual presence, our colleague from Princeton University in America, Professor Graham Burnett, is going to talk to us about something called the Friends of Attention, an artistic and activist collective in the US. Another totally different perspective. We're not giving you a unified message, we're coming at this issue from many different angles, and that's part of the point of what we're doing today. So that's it from me. Let me pass over to Edmund first of all. And again, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for listening.